with that, I'm happy to transition now to Mark Davis to introduce our main speaker for today's long program. Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And it's certainly my pleasure today to introduce James Ragan with D.A. Davidson presenting the important topic, what's ahead for the economy. James has worked in the financial services industry since 1992, joining D.A. Davidson in 2013 through the acquisition of Kroll Weeden in Los Angeles. Before that, he worked with Payne Weber and was an international bank examiner for the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. James is a graduate of UCLA in economics and went on to obtain his MBA at UCLA as well. In addition, he holds his Chartered Financial Analyst designation, the CFA, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. A very difficult designation to achieve. James lives in Seattle with his wife and 2 daughters. Please join me in welcoming James Ragan to Seattle Rotary, speaking today on what's ahead for the economy. James?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here. I'm going to share my screen as well. I will be using some slides today. And, once again, it's great to be here today. Thank you for those, your presentation, Jess. That was very inspirational. And given that we have a fairly bright outlook for the economy moving ahead after an awful 2020, it gives me a lot of confidence that we're in good hands with the younger generation moving forward. So I really appreciate you sharing your story. And really enjoy meeting with the Rotary today. It's great, number one, just to be with a large group of Seattleites, because that hasn't happened. I haven't done a lot of that over the last several months. I guess you guys have been continuing your meetings, but it's just really missed kind of the interactions that we get with people around town, through the pandemic. And also just great to meet with the Rotary Club. Your organization is such a positive force, and it's so important, even more so in the current environment. So I applaud all of you for the great work that you do. Today, just a little brief background. I manage a team of 6 financial analysts here in Seattle. We spend quite a bit of time on analyzing economic data, and that helps us with making investment decisions and recommendations. And then we build market outlooks that we share with the firm. The COVID-19 pandemic caused a US recession and really severe hardship for millions of people across the US and hundreds of millions on a global scale. So I'm going to call 2020 the year of the COVID-19 pandemic. There could be many other terms that we give 2020. Such a hard year with the healthcare crisis, with obviously the economic shutdown and the recession, large scale social unrest, and increasingly polarizing political climate. I'm not really here today to address all these huge problems, but I will discuss on a high level an economic outlook. And from that perspective, we do see better times ahead. In my presentation, I'm going to use several charts and graphs that'll show you. I think that the pictures kind of help to highlight the peaks and the valleys of the year that we saw in 2020. So bear with me on a few of the charts. This is the U.S. government reports gross domestic product or GDP for the country on a quarterly basis. Each quarter's report's released about 30 days after the end of the quarter. So the fourth quarter of 2020 hasn't been released yet. We expect that in a couple weeks. The data is reported in a few different formats, and the way I'm showing it here is the quarterly change in GDP from the prior quarter and annualized. And it goes back to 2006, so it's about 15 years worth of data. And I think it really highlights the dramatic changes that we saw in 2020, obviously. And you can see that going back over 15 years, quarterly GDP bounces around. It's mostly positive, but there's been some down quarters. And it also, you can see if you go back, if you look at the 2008, 2009 period, of course, that was the great financial crisis, and GDP was actually negative for 5 out of 6 consecutive quarters at that time. So, it was an awful period, as we all, most of us, certainly remember that. And then you can fast forward to the right there. dramatic change in 2020. You see the largest decline in the first quarter, which is the smaller down bar, and then dramatic 31% drop in the second quarter due to the shutdown, and then almost an equally dramatic rise in the third quarter as the economy started to reopen a little bit, but then we also had a lot of government support came in. Fourth quarter is not going to be as large as that. It'll start to revert back to the mean a little bit more, but we do expect a positive GDP number in the fourth quarter as well. But it's probably easier to look at the GDP on an annual basis. So this is basically the same data, but rather than look at the quarters, we're looking at it annually. And this goes back 20 years to the year 2000. And also on the far right there, we then shaded in gray are next 3 years, or 2020, the final year, full year is not reported yet, but the estimates that are basically are the consensus estimate from Wall Street economists. So once again, if you look at 2008, 2009, you can see the recession really had 2 years of negative GDP growth during that time. And then you can also see on the right there, the expected decline that we just lived through in 2020 of down 3.6%, but then a nice expected gain over the next couple of years, which is what I'm really talking about here today. If you go back to the financial crisis, you can see that the single strong, even though there was 10 years of gains there, the single strongest year was in 2015, where GDP grew 3.1%. And so if we do hit that target for 2021, which we think is very achievable and could be upside to that, it says 4.05% there, really 4.1. That will be the strongest single year of GDP growth in 20 years. You got to go all the way back to the year 2000 to see that. So that's why we're calling 2021 the year of growth. And why will the growth be so strong in 2020? Well, first and foremost, we think that it's going to be strength in consumer spending and job creation. I'm going to show you a few charts to look at that. And then also, to a lesser extent, we see signs that the business investment for capital spending, equipment, software, and even research and development has appeared to have bottomed, so we'll start to turn positive. And underlying all of that information is, and we all know this, that the numbers are enhanced by really unprecedented government spending. We've seen over $3 trillion of federal stimulus relief passed by Congress already. That includes the CARES Act of last April. And now just in December, there was another $900 billion relief package that was passed. And we think that there's expectations for more of that to come. And so that helped stem the decline in the middle of last year, and I think really will help to drive the recovery in 2021. So just very quickly, I just wanted to give a snapshot of the composition of GDP under the major categories. And it's generally the case, and you probably heard this before, that as goes the consumer, so goes the US economy. And that's because consumer spending is 68% of GDP. That's been pretty consistent. It was consistent before the recession of last year. And also, it's been consistent through the data. This was the annualized data that was updated as of the end of the third quarter. So consumer spending is 68%, more than 2/3 of the economy. Investment by businesses and in housing is about 17%. And then government expenditure is about 18%. And then you can see there that exports are a modest drag on GDP, the net exports. And what that means is that in the US, we almost always import more than we export. So we're consuming goods that aren't necessarily produced in the US. And so that becomes a drag on GDP. And so, and then you can see at the very bottom there, the US nominal GDP, about $21.17 trillion. It ended 2019, I'm sorry, at about $21.7 trillion. So that kind of reflects the decline that we saw over the first part of the year. The next few slides, I'm going to hope to show you that the consumer financial position is in very good shape, which should be good for spending. and also to show that there's strong growth in jobs. There's strong jobs growth from here is very possible. And I'm going to break down the composition of what we see in some of the jobs growth. So bear with me on the next 4 charts or so. So this is U.S. personal income and savings, goes back to 2011, so about 10 years of data. The green shaded area there is the personal income growth on a monthly basis, and then the personal savings rate is the gray line, which is kind of overlaid there. Personal income. So if you fast forward to the far right there, you can see that the personal income spiked in April, and that was a little counterintuitive due to the recession and the shutdown, but that's because of the government payments that came in, the CARES Act, which provided a lot of unemployment assistance, direct checks to people, and the PPP loans. And so that did end up going into a lot of consumers' hands. This data is an aggregate. There's a lot of pain for people along the spectrum, but in aggregate, personal income went up dramatically in the early part of the pandemic, and then actually, and what we saw from that is people were getting their payments, that a lot of people saved and didn't spend. The payments really helped save the household finances for many. The data has pulled back from those large increases of April and May, and you can see how it's kind of been trending down through the year. But even as we look at the data through the end of November there, the personal income levels remain pretty solid, actually above where it was pre-pandemic, and kind of in line with what we'd seen in some of the other previous years. And then you can also, and in fact, it's higher now than it was in, say, 2013 and 2016, which was, when it dipped even during the part of that 10-year expansion that we talked about earlier. The savings rate dramatically spiked as the government payments came in. You can see that there. Many people saved rather than spent, as I mentioned, but then that started to pull back as the pandemic raged on. But then even then, you can see now through the end of November, the savings rate was 12.9%. That's significantly above pre-pandemic levels. And what it shows us, it suggests that consumers do have the capacity to spend as confidence rises, and then as life inches back to normal a bit. And we're going to show a similar chart for household debt service, showing 2 things on this chart as well. The nominal value of household debt is the green bars there, and then the debt service ratio is the black line. What the debt service ratio is the monthly household debt payments. This is on credit cards, car loans, that type of thing, divided by disposable income, and that's the black line. So again, you can see on this chart, household debt continued to grow since the financial crisis. If you go back to the 08-09 period, but then stabilized in 2020. So debt hasn't really increased this year, or for 2020. But the debt service ratio, the black line there, which ranged between 10% to 11%, really for several years from 2011 to 2019, it's now dropped to just a little bit above 9%. So that's more than a 20-year low. So consumer finances from income and savings and financial obligations are in pretty healthy position. And that suggests to us that as the economy does start to reopen, the consumer balance sheet should not be a hindrance to spending. In fact, it kind of paves the way for strong spending. And then we're going to show you another chart on moving to the unemployment or employment area. This chart is equally as dramatic as that quarterly GDP chart that I showed you. So the gray bar here shows the total number of unemployed reported by the federal government monthly going back to 2001. And then the green line is that unemployment rate. And the chart shows clearly the massive spike in unemployment as the economy shut down beginning in March and April of 2020. And then a fairly dramatic improvement as the economy started reopening, especially through the summer. And if you saw the jobs report from last week, we know that there was a loss of jobs. So the jobs increase kind of stalled a little bit towards the end of the year as COVID started the spread got worse. But so when you look at the jobs at the end of 2020 and compare it to pre-pandemic, say the end of February of 2020, there's about 9.9 million fewer people. And we call that, calling that the jobs loss gap. And that's what we're going to talk about as we look to see what kind of jobs outlook we have in 2021, I mean. So this table, you don't have to look at all this data. I built a table of the 16 major job categories. There's dozens of other categories and subcategories, but these are the groups that contributed the most to that 9.9 million job loss gap that I'm talking about. And at the very bottom, I just showed the federal government number. I thought that was interesting because since February, there's actually been an increase to 41,000 federal government jobs, but the rest of them all show categories that have had job loss. And so I separated at the top there the 7 categories that between February of last year and December had more than 400,000 fewer people employed. So there's 7 of those categories, and highlighted in yellow are 5 of those that we think represent groups that will show huge gains, as huge and steady gains as the economy starts to reopen. And obviously the one that jumps out at you is right at the top, leisure and hospitality. That's, bars, restaurants, hotels, large events, several other categories, and they're still ended the year with almost 4 million fewer people employed. I mean, that's the group that needs the most help right now. That's also the group that, as the economy reopens, and that's largely going to be driven by how the vaccine gets distributed and how long that takes. But as the economy reopens, a lot of these jobs are going to come back rather quickly. They're not going to all come back all at once, obviously, but it will fuel a pretty strong recovery in jobs that could be steady throughout the year. Again, once things start to reopen a little bit. Local government, there's the number 2 there. That a lot of budget pressure, and there's now with the new administration coming in and new Congress, a lot of feeling that they will provide probably a little bit more state and local government support in the next stimulus package. And if and when that happens, that really will help local government spending coming back. Healthcare, which is, I don't think people realize how there has been a significant loss of jobs in healthcare in 2020 because a lot of the elective surgeries, elective procedures, routine doctor's visits have been postponed. So those are going to start to come back very strongly. And then obviously the education jobs will come back as schools start to reopen. So you can see from, just from looking at some of the data where the jobs are going to come from, we can point to several pretty key areas that are positioned to have a higher job growth as the economy starts to reopen. I mentioned the business investment earlier, and I just have a very quick chart on this. We looked at the S&P 500, so large companies, and looked at capital spending that they're making on a 12-month basis. And so that's the green bar there, and then the gray overlay is just the year-over-year change in the level of spending. So you can see that capital spending actually peaked a little bit before before the recession from COVID, but then really declined dramatically over the first half of last year. But you can see over the far right of that green chart that it has stabilized over the last couple of quarters. The rate of decline is still negative, but there's pretty good evidence that businesses are starting to invest more again, and especially in 2020. This chart doesn't show it, but there was actually an increase in investment in technology and software. Perhaps not a surprise, given the strength that we've seen in a lot of the internet, large digital type of businesses. But we are seeing evidence of that. So business investment, if it turns just a little bit, along with the consumer recovery that we're expecting, that's going to lead to pretty strong economic data in 2021. So that's basically a pretty simple macro overview of why we expect pretty good data for the national economy in 2021. I thought, since for this group, I thought it'd be interesting to maybe take a look at our state and kind of see if Washington's in a better or worse position than the rest of the economy. And I think that, again, I'm looking at this from a very macro perspective, because I think there's certainly weakness in the state of Washington, especially around Seattle, as there's struggles for hundreds of small businesses. I think a lot of the mom and pops, especially here in the downtown area, are going to take a little bit longer to recover. And also there's a bit of hardship faced right now by the state's largest employer, which of course is Boeing. But in the aggregate, the state of Washington is largely tracking the national economy. We went to the Washington State Department of Commerce for some of this data, and data has come out through the end of some of the data is September, some of it's November, but expectation that the Washington State GDP will be down 5.5%, or employment down 5.5% in 2020. That's in line with the national average. Those employment declines are going to be led by the leisure and hospitality sector, perhaps a little bit worse in Washington versus the US economy, down 25% versus 21. Manufacturing, roughly in line, a little bit worse than the national economy, down 6. But through it all, the state is expected to have GDP decline of 3.7% and then growing 4% in 2021. And so, we conclude from this that the state of Washington is likely to participate in the national U.S. jobs and economic growth in 2021. And, we have a pretty robust, diverse economy in this state. And, there's issues obviously with, as I said, the small mom and pop businesses, and hopefully there'll be programs to address that on some level. But I did have a couple other slides from the Washington State Department of Commerce just to highlight some of the data that we're talking about here. The state unemployment rate through the end of November was 5.9%. So it was up 2% in the year. So that's a negative data point. But the national unemployment rate is 6.7%. So you have a little bit better employment in the state, less unemployment than we have at the national level. And then when we look at, you go down to the business, some of the business detail below, taxable retail sales are down about 9%. So that's gonna pick up, some of the small businesses out there. But taxable business income, which is a big number there, is only down 1% year to date, and that's actually will help the budget. It signifies that there are some businesses throughout the state that are doing very well. And I have a slide which shows that a bit here, which is just breaking down that taxable business income. You can see that the big three are retail, trade, wholesale trade, and manufacturing. Collectively, those three are more than 50% of the state's taxable business income. And this is data that was the 3 months through October. So things were pretty bleak in the state of Washington, kind of in the June timeframe, but this would be August, September, and October. And things really started picking up, especially for the retail trade and wholesale trade. Looking through some of the detail in the retail trade, most of the areas were pretty strong. The apparel sector, which we obviously have some large apparel companies here in the state of Washington, those sales were down a bit, but we saw growth in electronics, appliances, building materials, which would be like the Home Depots and the Lowe's of the world. And of course, online sales, internet sales were also up very strongly year to date and over those 3 months as well. You see manufacturing being very weak there, and it's probably somewhat related to Boeing, but also in that 3-month period, petroleum refining was down substantially, as was a large equipment manufacturing. And so that data should start to come back as the economy grows. And then you can see the other decliner there, kind of in the middle of the pack, was leisure and hospitality, down significantly year to date. And so really no surprises in that data. But I think that the takeaway from this slide in terms of just the business income in Washington State, as I mentioned earlier, is just very, very well diversified. And I think it just bodes well on a macro basis for the state economy to kind of rebound nicely, and certainly in line with the national economy. So that's kind of the high level overview today, completes my presentation. We do have a few minutes available for Q&A, so I'll turn it back over to the moderators.
James, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We've got time. We've got like 5 questions in 2 minutes. You ready for this?
Okay.
Pop quiz. First of all, oh no, I've lost my question. Oh no. Oh, here we go. Maybe I'm missing something, but how is a year of 4% growth after a year of 4% decline anything other than zero growth?
Well, it's a good question. You have different starting points, but so it's not exact. But I think it's a good observation. I think if we do get 4% growth in 2021, we will be just about back to where we were in 2019. So basically, if you look at a 2-year basis, we're going to be basically flat. But I think there's a couple things there. Number one, the economy is not growing yet because the vaccine's not out there, and we have a real problem with COVID. The economic growth is going to ramp or accelerate throughout the year. So as we end 2021, the outlook for economic growth in 2022 should be, and we expect it to be very strong as well. It was up 3% on that chart. And so I think the point is not to look so much about where we were. You have to look ahead on where we're going. So still, we did, even coming out of the financial crisis, we never got a year of 4% growth. And I think that'll be a pretty dramatic number to celebrate. And if the vaccine gets out there quicker, it could even be better than that.
Okay. All right. You got 50 seconds to answer the next one. Will the second stimulus be sufficient to keep small businesses afloat, such as your jobs estimate will be realized?
Yeah. So the stimulus that was just passed at the end of December was $900 billion. About half of that is scheduled to be given out over the next 8 weeks. And so that is truly a bridge. I think it's going to end in the third or fourth week of March. And so if things aren't looking better by then from an economic and COVID perspective, there will be a need for another similar package. In the meantime, we'll probably see them working on a bill to get that check to $2,000. So it's enough if the COVID vaccine rollout, starts to improve from where we've seen. And with the new administration coming in, though, we think there's an appetite for doing another bill if necessary.
Wow. 2 seconds over. I love it. Thank you so much, James. We really appreciate being here. I like the fact that you said it was simple. Your simple is different than my simple, but it made sense. And I like your optimism. So this is awesome. So let's look forward to 2021. Thank you so much.